sit here. I'm gonna sit here. Yep. Yeah, either one of those two. Probably the first one since you'll get up for it. And I'll get them up. Yeah, this is a nice venue. This is the research.
Well, good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Bob Giolis, the President and CEO here at Research Triangle Foundation. Welcome to your Research Triangle Park. We're happy to have everyone here this morning. I understand, of course, it's Monday. There's always a little traffic around the park, so more folks are expected here shortly. You know, one of the things that best defines our state, I think, and the people of North Carolina is our great abundance of faith. Our faith in each other, our faith in our institutions, our faith in the future. And I think we have demonstrated that over and over again with the investments we've made in our state and in our people. And obviously, Research Triangle Park, your park, is a great representation of that. And of course, the other one, the one we've sort of all grown up with together, has been our great airport and the services that the airport provides. You cannot underestimate the value in our region to have a service that links and connects you to the rest of the country and to the rest of the world. We know that for this park to stay competitive, for our state to stay competitive, we have to continue to have faith and support and invest in the kinds of services and the reputation of a really first-class airport. It's a beautiful facility. I'm so proud of Michael and his team for the work that they do. And so it is our pleasure to host everyone this morning. We hope you have a great time. I know you're going to have a great program. And with that, I want to turn it over to our next speaker. Thank you all very much for coming. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Bob. Can I buy that tie? It's pretty. I like it. Good morning. On behalf of the Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority, I would like to welcome you to RDU's first Aviation Symposium. We are excited to have our region's leaders gathered here to discuss the economic impact international air service has on our region. Before we get started, I would like to thank Bob. Thank you again, Bob, for that kind introduction and comments, and the Research Triangle Foundation for hosting this wonderful get-together. I would also like to extend a special thanks to our state and local governmental officials that are here with us today. And I would ask that, as I call their name, if they would kindly stand, and they may remain standing if they like. Representing Commerce Secretary Sharon Decker is Susan Fleetwood. Susan? Thank you, Susan. Nick Tennyson, Chief Deputy Secretary, North Carolina Department of Transportation, and Bobby Walston, Director of Airports for the North Carolina Department of Transportation. Thank you, Bobby. Whit Tuttle, Director of North Carolina Department of Tourism. The Honorable Mayor of Durham, Bill Bell, who's joined us today. Thank you, Bill. And Council Member Eddie Davis. from Durham County, Commissioners Reckow and Wendy Jacobs, are they here today? I think the commissioners had a workshop meeting this morning, and that is the reason for their absence. From Wake County, Commissioners Joe Bryan and Carolyn Sullivan. Thank you. And from the City of Raleigh, Mayor McFarland sends her regrets, but we welcome Wayne Mariano of the Raleigh City Council. Several members of the RDU board are also with us today, and I'll recognize them and ask them to please stand. Dickie Thompson's with us. Terry Yergin, Rob Tier, Clay Wheeler, and Adrian Cole. And Farad Ali sitting at another table away from the other council commissioners. That's right, with Terry, I understand. Everyone in this room is here for a reason, and that is that we care about this region's economic future. As you are aware, or may be aware, RDU is one of the region's economic engines with an annual impact of $8 billion, with a B, billion dollars. Now, we take this role very seriously, and over the past 15 years, we have committed to investing in the infrastructure that will support our region's air service growth for the next 20 to 25 years. We built a new parking garage, completed Terminal 2, and just completed the renovation of Terminal 1. We continue to recruit new air service and recently celebrated the 20th anniversary of air service from Raleigh-Durham to London through American Airlines. We still have plenty to do. We will be developing a 20-year master plan that will ensure we maintain our $1.2 billion in assets in the world-class fashion our customers have been accustomed to. We will also be looking at how we can develop airport land that will not be used for aeronautical development. Finally, and most importantly, we will continue to develop air service that will connect our region to the world. Today you will hear more about international air service and what it means to our region. And we hope you will leave with a better understanding of how it positively affects and impacts our region's economy. At this time, I'll turn the podium over to our President and Chief Executive Officer, Michael Landreth. Michael.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can everybody hear me on this mic? Okay, good. Well, good morning, everybody. And I'd like to welcome our region's leadership to this Aviation Symposium on the economic benefit of international air service at RDU. I'd like to first express my thanks to Bob Giolis and his entire staff for hosting this event. What a great place to host it. It's our economic engine for the region, so what a great place to have a discussion about international air service as well. Today we're going to focus on talking about international air service and how important I believe it is for our continued growth here within the region itself. I think some of you actually participated in an event we had this past summer in Terminal 2 where we hosted a 20-year anniversary for American Airlines and their nonstop service to London. We believe there is room for additional nonstop international service to RDU to support the global reach of the regional Triangle region, and we're working every day to deliver on that opportunity. Today, we're very fortunate to have two distinguished speakers. The first is Mr. William Swelbar, who will provide a perspective on the on the aviation industry, international air service, and what a community like ours can expect and what we must do to compete in that international arena. The second speaker will be Dr. Michael Walden, who will talk about the economic impact of one international flight on our community. We'll make time for questions at the end. I'll do a little Q&A with them. I've got some questions for them, and then we're going to open it up to the audience so the audience can also ask some questions as well. So let me introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Mr. William Swelbar. He's been an Executive Vice President of InterVista Consulting since December of 2013. He has been an independent director of Hawaiian Holdings since November of 2005 and serves as a director of Hawaiian Airlines, Inc. as a designee of the Association of Flight Attendants. He is an adjunct fellow of the Economic Strategy Institute and member of the advisory board of the MIT Global Airline Industry Program. Mr. Swelbar received a BS from Eastern Michigan University and an MBA from the George Washington University. I will tell you, as I talk to other airport managers and leaders across the country, usually when we're talking about airlines and what we think is going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years, the first question that comes out of everybody's mouth is, what did Swelbar say? Well, guess what? You're going to get to hear that today. Bill, tell us.
Good morning. This is a real honor for me to be here and talk on this very important topic. The title I gave this presentation was a look back, a look forward. We're not going to spend a lot of time looking back, but I think it's important to put this industry into context and to appreciate the rate of change that is taking place in the mindsets of the chief executives that are running the airline industry today. It's a very, very different mindset than what it is that we've seen in the past. So one of the presentations that I like to do is to just spend a little time taking a look at the business cycles that have defined the airline industry since deregulation. And if we just go back through some of the cycles, we'll spend some time looking at what it is that people were saying at that point in time and what it is that they're saying today. But when we think about the forces that have changed the airline model, and change is the operative word, the relationship of airline revenue to gross domestic product. It used to be that if I had a good GDP forecast, I could predict the revenue of the airline industry plus or minus 4%. That is not the case anymore. There has been a divorce in the relationship between GDP and airline revenue, and that has caused the industry to rethink its model and how it approaches the business. There's a much slower demand environment, particularly in the domestic business. And so it's causing people to take and the industry to shift its flying from domestic flying to international flying. That's a very, very important point, is that there has been a real mindset change that we need to diversify our route portfolio away from the domestic business and more into the international business. Then, of course, when you have a business that manages to lose $62 billion in a decade, you probably need to rethink how it is you do things. I don't know how the business people in this room feel, but it's probably not sustainable. The price of jet fuel has forever changed the business. This is a business that was built on oil and the price equivalent of jet fuel of $30 a barrel. Today, it's about $130 a barrel into the wing in terms of jet fuel. So it's absolutely changed the game and how it is that the business needs to be approached. Of course, consolidation has made a tremendous impact on how it is that we approach air service development. We have fewer people to talk to today. I mean, who would have ever thought that just 10 years ago that we would say 4 carriers would have 87% of the domestic market? I mean, absolutely numbing how it is that this industry has defragmented itself in a short period of time. And then, of course, we have business executives that actually talk about an industry earning at least its cost of capital. This is something that the airline industry really forgot and didn't read that page in Finance 101. But now are very, very focused on that. And so we've moved from a market share mindset to a profit mindset. And that's very important to what it is to set the table for what it is that we're going to talk about today. Just a business cycle ago, Warren Buffett said, if a far-sighted capitalist had been President Kitty Hawk, he would have done his successors a huge favor by shooting Orville down. This is at a time when the industry was losing $62 billion. Even Warren Buffett did invest in U.S. Airways at one point in time and couldn't get out of the airline investment business fast enough. And then finally, we have Richard Anderson at Delta saying this industry is no longer a hobby. And I think it's safe to say this industry was a hobby for a long, long time, but is not a hobby today. Capacity, or the number of seats that are put into the market, like I say, I mean, there was a very, very strong correlation to what it is the industry health was with the economy. But it's safe to say this industry grew much faster than economic growth and became quite inefficient. And it was a model that was built where it is that marginal revenue, if marginal revenue exceeded marginal cost, then I'm going to go ahead and add a flight. It made air service development very, very easy. Today, the industry looks at all costs and that the fact that the flight has to be profitable on its own, on a standalone basis, and no longer is just a whim that if marginal revenue exceeded marginal cost, I'll add the flight. That's not the case anymore. The one thing that we can say is that this business has been very, very good to the consumer. When adjusted for inflation, airfares probably minus 40% since the industry was deregulated. Now, I don't know about the business people in this room, but I don't want to run a business where it is that my unit revenue, adjusted for inflation, is a negative 40%. So it has certainly put a lot of people in the seats of airplanes, but it certainly hasn't been a profitable business, a sustainable business, and that is changing. When we take a look at it, and I'm sure when I go to a cocktail party, the last thing I ever tell anybody is I work in the airline business, because everybody has got a war story, right? And most of it has to do with the fact these fares are going up. Well, when you lose $62 billion, the fares need to go up. And the industry needed to find other sources of revenue. But even when those bag fees and everything else is added in, the price of an airline ticket, airline travel, is still growing less than the rate of inflation when you take a look at this business cycle compared to the last, which is very, very different. This is where it is I get in trouble when I say the best thing that ever happened to this business was the day that oil went to $147 a barrel. Because at some point the industry needed to make some pretty hard decisions as to how to change its business model if it was going to be sustainable. And certainly at $147 a barrel, if we were still there, the industry would be even much smaller than it is today. But the industry needed to look inward, pull capacity out of the system, and begin to be profitable on a standalone basis, with Roots being profitable on a standalone basis. This cycle is something different, and if you take a look at this, it really just points to the fact there's margin expansion much greater than there has been in any of the previous business cycles. So it does say that something very different is going on, whether it be from a cost control basis, whether it be from finding additional revenue, whether it be from finding efficiency in operation. This industry is very, very different today. When we take a look at what's going on around the globe, and that's really what we're here to talk about today, worldwide financials are very strong. And what's very interesting is that it's the airline industry in North America that is earning the highest margins of any region of the world. But really what it is I want you to take away from this chart is not so much that the airline industry is profitable. What it is I want you to take a look at is that column called RPK growth. That's traffic growth. And what it says is that traffic in the Middle East is growing 13%. Traffic in the Asia Pacific region is growing 7.4%, and traffic in North America is growing 2.7%. What that says very, very clearly to me is that we need to be looking to add service to points other than North America. And that's where it is that the growth opportunity is. That's where it is that the world is turning. It's about the international business and much less about the domestic business. As I said, the historical relationship between airline industry growth and gross domestic product is broken. So what are we going to do? What's going to happen in the future? What will cause the legacy carriers to grow again? It's a really good question, because it doesn't appear to me that the industry is adding airplanes for growth. What it is that they're doing is basically we're playing with a finite number set of airplanes that if you're going to attract new service to your market, it likely means that that particular carrier took an airplane from another piece of its system to fly your market because it has better financial attributes than it has in other parts of the system. Where will that growth be? I think we've answered that. It's in the international arena. What about the low-cost carriers? And what about Southwest? Southwest is a very different carrier today, not growing near as fast as it has historically. And where it is that Southwest is likely to grow is in Dallas, when it is that the Wright Amendment restrictions come off in October of this year, and at Washington National. They're growing in various regions of the U.S., and what it is that you're going to see from Southwest is an airline that is looking to grow internationally because the domestic opportunities are just few, even for a carrier with a cost structure that low. What are the future of the ultra LCCs? Those are the Spirits and the Allegiants, and you heard about those this morning, and they're very, very exciting companies. My guess is they're going to be very interested in a market like yours, because there is a leisure market out there that's very important to tap as well. And so you certainly want to pay attention to them. They're very, very interesting. Will there be a regional industry? If I'm in Jacksonville, North Carolina, I'm very concerned about what's going on in the regional industry, because there are many, many troubles in the regional sector of this business, which you are not dependent on. But there are going to be a number of markets that are dependent on the regional industry that are going to suffer air service loss in a fairly significant way, have already realized some air service loss, but will realize more down the road. And then finally, what does all this mean for our airports and for our passengers? And it's all going to have a significant effect. And the only thing that I can stand here and promise and try to be prescient, as Mike suggested, is that the air service architecture tomorrow is going to look very different than it does today. So rather than GDP, what are the growth drivers going to be? Well, relatively cheap capital is going to be a growth driver, and that's proving to be true, particularly in the Asia Pacific and the Middle East regions. Relatively stable oil prices. While we talked about oil prices going up, the good news is they're relatively stable today. And unstable oil prices are probably more concerning to the industry than are high oil prices. Aircraft technology that flies longer, not just faster, or flies faster, not just longer. What it is that we need to find is, just like the day when the jet airplane was introduced to the system, the industry needs to find some technology-induced efficiencies. And that will be very, very important. I think we'll find some. We're already seeing some in the new aircraft that are being introduced into the market today. And then finally, markets with an emerging middle class that can afford travel for the first time. And really what it is I think about is China. Just imagine when it is that middle class has enough money to travel. I mean, the traffic growth will be unquestionably high. The wake vortex of the Middle East carriers. Now, Bill, what does that mean? Well, wake vortex has its own definition. We're not going to get into that. But what's going on in the Middle East region of the world is amazing from an airline perspective. The growth is significant. They have found that they can use their geography and their low-cost structures to compete for traffic around the world. And the Indian subcontinent has become a very important part of their traffic accumulation and will continue into the future. It's a very exciting place to watch. Infrastructure. Sorry, New York, Toronto, and Mexico City, you're all full. I need to look for alternatives. And that's exactly what it is the airline industry is doing today. It's looking for alternatives. It's looking for alternatives other than the traditional gateways of New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Washington. And for the upstarts, and there are going to be upstarts internationally, just like there are going to be upstarts like Spirit and Allegiant in the domestic market. Can they arbitrage their cost advantage relative to the incumbents? And I will say yes, over time they will. It's a really challenging time for air service, and we know that air service development and economic development are inextricably linked. Airlines are engaged in a practice called capacity discipline. And I kind of described that a little bit ago, that if you are going to attract a new flight from Raleigh-Durham to Seattle, so they are probably looking to take an airplane from another part of their system and use that airplane in Raleigh-Durham, Seattle, because Raleigh-Durham, Seattle is more profitable than is the route where it is they pulled the airplane. You are basically playing a zero-sum game. And it's very, very important that any market differentiates itself in this zero-sum game because the airlines are so focused on profitability across their entire system. Medium-sized and small airports have felt the brunt of this capacity discipline. And the airline consolidation has had an effect as well. Certainly Raleigh has taken a couple lumps just like everybody else has, but nowhere near to the extent as small airports out there today have lost over 21% of their capacity since 2009. That's a significant number. The air service development model has to change, just like airlines are changing, and that's a lot of what we're talking about here. The good news is markets like Boston, Austin, San Jose, and San Diego are getting international service. That's really a significant story. The bad news is they're your competitors. So what it is that you have to prove is your model is better than adding a service at any one of those particular markets. And that's an important part of the air service development process. The Boeing 787 is a game changer. It makes markets like yours viable. San Diego would not have London nonstop service or Tokyo service if it were not for this airplane. Denver would not have Tokyo service if it were not for this airplane. This airplane flies longer, more efficient, and has fewer seats. And that's what it is and how it is that an airplane can be built to serve secondary markets like this and not necessarily just the traditional gateways. Across the Atlantic, we really came to know and appreciate just how much the low-cost carriers meant in adding capacity and bringing value to the air travel customer in the U.S. domestic market. What it is that we do know is that we're going to see the same thing across the Atlantic. Norwegian is already a carrier that has started service to the Bay Area, to the LA Basin, to New York, and to Florida. They will be looking for other opportunities, just like will Ryanair, who has placed an order that can do transoceanic flying, and a carrier upstart called WOW. So what it is, I think, is the low-cost carrier sector is going to present opportunities just like the traditional carriers might. It's all about the international. The U.S. network carriers have little appetite, as we've talked about in the domestic market. They do have appetite for international growth. That's where they have found they can be most profitable and enjoy their efficiencies. Non-U.S. flag carriers have shown an appetite for non-traditional gateways. And that's true at those markets where it is that we just talked about, the San Jose's and the San Diegos and the like. And the fact that Austin got nonstop service from British Airways absolutely underscores the fact that the non-U.S. flag carriers are looking for opportunities other than traditional opportunities in the U.S. market. And that is significant news. You're blessed with terrific domestic air service here. Smaller airports are going to struggle. Likely you're not. You have great economic underpinnings. This phase of air service development for you then is about international air service development. International opportunities drive economic development. And I'm going to close with, just like it is a net present value decision for an airline to fly your market or not, it is a net present value proposition for the community to invest in garnering that air service or not. And that is one of the big questions that lies before you. And Dr. Walden, I'm sure, has a lot to say on that issue. With that, that ends my formal remarks. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bill. As you can see, he is a very dynamic speaker and knows a lot about the industry. So thanks, Bill. Appreciate those comments. You know, the air carrier business model has actually changed, and Bill kind of highlighted some of those things. But I want to kind of shape the conversation today and say air service development is economic development at the end of the day. And how do we quantify that? Well, what we decided to do is hire Dr. Walden to come in and look at just one international flight to see what the economic impact of that one flight would actually be. We asked him to look at what we call the net impact of one international flight. And notice I said net economic spending, not gross, which is the pure number of dollars that are spent in our community each year and not dollars that actually flow through. Dr. Walden will also talk about job creation, impact on GDP to the triangle, and finally, public revenues that are generated as a result of one flight. Our next speaker is Dr. Michael Walden. He is a William Neal Reynolds Distinguished Professor at North Carolina State University, where he has taught since 1978. The author of 8 books and over 250 articles and reports. Among Walden's specialty is economic impact analysis, particularly for public and educational institutions. Walden frequently comments about the economy and the media, writes a biweekly newspaper column, broadcasts a daily radio program, and makes scores of public presentations each year in various forms. He is the winner of several national and state awards for excellence in public service. Please help me welcome to the podium Dr. Michael Walden.
Well, thank you very much. Let me be clear. I was not hired to do this. This is not a consulting project. The RDU Airport Authority approached NC State to undertake this analysis. I, as the project director, my salary didn't change. I want to make that clear. So this is a collaboration between North Carolina State University and the RDU Airport Authority. I was happy to be the project director. I had an able graduate student work with me over the summer, and I want to share those results with you. I might say that what I'm going to do is akin to the old joke that you hear of 3 individuals looking at a light socket where there's no light bulb. One is a electrical engineer, one is a scientist, one's an economist. The electrical engineer looks at that bare socket and says, well, let me get in there and see if I can work my magic on the wiring, et cetera, to create some illumination. The scientist says, let me look around the room here and see if I can assemble a pseudo light bulb. The economist says, assume we have a light bulb. So what I'm going to do is assume we have one of these direct flights either to Paris or to Frankfurt. And what I've done is to try to calibrate the various economic impacts that one of those 2 flights would have on the triangle economy. In thinking about this, we concluded there are at least 4 identifiable and separate economic impacts for the community to think about. One I term the operational economic impact. This is the impact that comes from having this new direct flight at RDU. That's going to be some additional revenue into the airport. That's going to mean some additional employment at the airport. There will be what economists call multiplier effects, as for example, the airport has contracts with various input suppliers. The airport obviously hires people, and if there are additional people hired, or at least there are additional work hours because of this flight, those workers are going to spend their money, some part of their money in the community. So this is what we call the operational economic impact. The second impact, I'll give you numbers on all of these. The second impact we call the global markets impact. Bill alluded to this. By having one of these international flights, the Triangle will have greater access to more geographical areas in the world, geographical areas that are growing, that are generating additional income. That will provide access for Triangle businesses to place themselves in those markets, selling products and services that are made here in the Triangle. So again, we call that the global markets impact. The productivity enhancing impact, the way to think about this is, why do most of us prefer flying direct rather than flying via connections? It's because we save time. We don't have the downtime when we land at an intermediate airport. We don't have the downtime where if we have to change planes. And time is money. Time is valuable to workers, especially people in the business community. So we've tried to estimate the value of that saved time by having one of these two flights and getting to point A versus having to get to point A through the existing connections. Also, it could be the case, and we looked at this, that some of these, one of these international flights, direct flights to point A or B or C, might actually have lower ticket prices than if we flew through the existing service. So we call this impact the productivity enhancing impact. And then finally, this is the big one, and Bill hit on this point several times by pointing out that the growth is really in the international market. We all know that we are in an increasingly globalized economy. It is important for regions like this one to be connected. If we are connected to a greater extent, that presents more business opportunities for businesses here. It also presents more investment opportunities for firms and individuals in other parts of the world to invest here. So it's a two-way street. And to the extent that we enhance our connectivity through another direct flight, that, the literature suggests, is going to enhance our rate of economic growth over time. So we've tried to calibrate that and present some numbers associated with that long-run economic growth impact from a new international direct flight. So before I give you some numbers on this, I'm going to tell you what you already know, and that is that the Triangle region, and Bob knows this like the back of his hand, the Triangle region, of course, is a fabulous area. I've been here now going on 37 years. I remember when my wife and I first moved here, one of our concerns was that there weren't a lot of places to shop. There just didn't seem to be a lot going on here. And of course, you cannot say that now. This is the up-and-coming, I will not mince words here, this is the up-and-coming region in the country, and everyone knows it. And you merely have to drive around the Triangle and see what's going on in Durham, and see what's going on in downtown Raleigh. See what will be going on, for example, in the Chatham Park development, that this is the growth region of the country. And that growth is based on real things. I was at a talk the other day that was talking about real estate, and one of the comments that the individual made when talking about some other regions of the country was, well, he said, yeah, the real estate's coming back there, but it's really not based on anything real. It's based on just good feelings. He said, your area, on the other hand, he said the construction that's going on in your area is based on real economic fundamentals. And I simply have some of those highlighted here on the slide. Our GDP growth, Bill mentioned GDP growth simply being the rate of growth of everything that we produce in the area. If you look back over several decades, we've been growing at twice the rate of the nation. Job growth has been 3 times the rate of the nation in the last 10 years. we have a 40% higher rate of workers with a bachelor's degree or higher. That's probably the number that stands out most to me. We have a young and relatively more affluent population. I think someone, Bob, mentioned rated this area as one of the best places to live for young people. I teach young people all the time. They seem to be, sometimes they don't show up in class on Monday. Maybe they had too much of that fun over the weekend. We are connected already internationally. We have exports that are around $5 billion. We're obviously home to international technology companies as well as companies in other industries, but I just highlight technology. And we're also home now to an increasing number of foreign-born workers, which again is important for this foray into the impact of an international flight. So we have a lot of positives here. I know that our folks in the Airport Authority make those positives known to companies and airlines around the country. All right, let me give you some numbers. You should be impressed that your County Commissioner, Mr. Bryan, asked me before. He said, are you guaranteeing these numbers? No, I can't guarantee these numbers. These are forecasted numbers, but I think they are based on, as opposed to what my friend said about some other real estate markets, they are based on real positive underlying factors. So if we first looked at what I called that operational economic impact, that is the impact that simply having an additional direct international flight coming out of RDU on a daily basis, what's that going to mean in terms of the additional revenue coming to the airport and then flowing out into the community, additional jobs coming to the airport, some additional jobs prompted by that. And as we expect, and I'll get into this, why this is the case later, as we expect the flight to increase over time, we would expect this impact to rise over time. The initial impact would be on the order of a $25 million additional boost to the community and about 100 jobs. Not tremendous, and this takes into account the fact that this accounts for leakage. All the money that's spent on tickets here is not going to stay here, but this impact would grow over time. And if we expect the flight to grow as the model suggests, we're looking at in 25 years an impact of around $171 million and over 600 jobs. Now that's just the impact from having that flight based here at RDU. If we look at the global markets impact, and my graduate student, bless her heart, she tediously spent weeks going through airline schedules and looking at what having one of these two flights would mean in terms of greater access to markets around the world. We estimated that there would be about 40 more markets in the world that one of these two flights would provide greater access for businesses at RDU. This is going to put us in contact to a greater degree with markets that are adding annual income at the rate of about $0.3 trillion a year, $300 billion a year. So the point there being that our businesses will have greater access to competing for some of that business that the $300 billion is generating. Now this is much too complicated for you to see, but I'll probably put it up there just so you're impressed with the amount of work that was involved in this. But again, my student went tediously through the schedules and looked at what having one of the two flights, either the Frankfurt or Paris, would mean in terms of a traveler who is trying to reach destination A. Maybe they're trying to reach Prague. How would they have to go now? What routes would they have to take now, usually through Heathrow? What would that mean in terms of ticket costs? But also, very importantly, what would that mean in terms of time? And how would those two important factors that we all consider as travelers change if the Paris direct route was available or the Frankfurt direct route was available? And what she found was that these costs would change to the good, that is, the cost would be lower, to a very, very significant degree. Now, these are not necessarily costs that are going to show up in any ledger, but they are important for the traveler. And again, we have extrapolated these savings over time, again, expecting that whichever international route is chosen or we were able to acquire, would grow in volume over time. And we're looking at savings that are in the three-figure million-dollar level a year. And again, these are savings that business people are very, very aware of. And obviously, if it's cheaper for you as a business traveler to reach Prague to do business with one of these two routes than it is to go through Heathrow or some other connection, then obviously that's going to make that trip more worthwhile for you, as is the reverse, someone coming back from Prague. So this was a calibration that tried to get at that fact. And then lastly, the biggest impact, Bill again alluded to this, is that you can look at a tremendous number of studies that have been done by people like me, economists, over the years, who, especially in the age since globalization, our current wave of globalization started, which economists somewhat earmark around 2000 with the advent of the World Trade Organization, but globalization has really taken off since then, that you can find an independent link, an independent positive link between the availability of airline service, and particularly international airline service, and the economic growth of the region that has that service. That is to say, if you increase the international linkages, airline linkages for a region, you're going to increase economic growth in that region. So I took the results of those studies, and amazingly, unlike we find oftentimes in economic research where, to use the old Harry Truman complaint, one economist says on the one hand this, on the other hand this. That's why Harry Truman said, give me a one-handed economist. He was tired of getting that divergent advice. Here I found that the research was very, very consistent in terms of the size of the parameter here. So I applied those parameters to the triangle's projected rate of economic growth, and this is based on where we think the nation is going in terms of future economic growth, and then obviously bumping that up to a degree because the triangle is growing faster. Applied those parameters and then mapped out for you how much more in terms of GDP the triangle would be expected to grow by having one of these two international linkages than having them without. And again, it starts rather modestly at a bump up of about $57 million, but then grows over time. And after 25 years, the estimate is that by having one of these two international flights, the triangle's GDP would be $1.4 billion higher than it would be without. Now, I should point out to you, that's on a projected base of the total triangle GDP 25 years down the road of $100 billion. So it's about a 1%, 1.5% bump. Also, we can translate that bump to jobs, and we estimate again that the economic impact would start out rather modestly, about 566 jobs, but after 25 years would grow to adding about 14,000 jobs in the triangle. So, and one other thing, public revenues, obviously to the extent that the triangle economy is bigger, the public sector will be able to tap into that. And the public revenues to particularly to, and I focused only on local governments here, municipalities and counties in the region, not the state. Public revenues in present value terms, again, sorry to use the jargon, but what I'm doing here is going out a certain number of years and projecting what the additional revenues would be over each of those spans of years, and then converting them to a current aggregate number. And let me use the last one here after 25 years. Based on the additional economic growth we would project from having the international linkage, the present value of the additional annual public revenues over those 25 years in present value terms or today's terms in one lump sum, that would be around $272 million. So in summary, the operational impact would start out at about $25 million, 100 jobs, and would grow over time. The global impact would put us in contact to a greater degree with at least 40 additional markets, meaning that it will be easier for triangle business people to access those markets, do businesses in those markets, as well as for foreign companies, foreign interests, to access the triangle and invest in the triangle. And really the takeaway number, if I had to give you one takeaway, because it really accounts for all of these impacts and together, would be the long-run productivity impact of, after about 25 years, the Triangle's GDP would be roughly $1.4 billion higher, along with 14,000 jobs as a result of the institution of one of these two direct routes. So let me conclude. Let me sit down. I'll certainly entertain questions at our appropriate time. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate you and your presentations. What I thought we would do now is I've got a couple questions I'm going to ask the two speakers to try to get this thing kind of started, and then we're going to open it up to the audience, allow the audience to ask some questions as well. A lot of these questions you'll hear from me are questions that I hear in the community. So as we get out and we talk to business leaders and economic development partners, here's what I hear. So Bill, I'm going to start with you first. You know, we've heard a lot about the economy, the GDP growth. It's faster than most places across the country. Great place to start a business. All these accolades about our region. You know, why aren't the airlines just falling over us to continue to add service in the market? I don't get it, Bill.
But they are, Mike. Look, this is a capital-intensive, labor-intensive business where an airline, when you're talking about international service, you're talking about dedicating an airplane that has $60 to $90 million associated with it. It is a big decision. And, you know, at this point, it is, you know, up until now, it's been a lot easier to put that airplane in New York than it is to take a look at a gateway like Raleigh-Durham. But we're seeing a mindset change where it is that the economics out of a market like Raleigh-Durham can support that service. We haven't seen that in the past.
Okay, great. So what are other communities similar in size doing to recruit international air service?
Incentives are now the name of the game. Whether it is that we agree with it in concept or not, it's given the fact that, as I described, this is a game, a zero-sum game with airplanes. I, as San Diego, am doing something to differentiate myself from Austin, and Austin is doing something to differentiate itself from Raleigh-Durham, and Raleigh-Durham is going to have to do something to differentiate itself with Kansas City. And those are the types of things that are going on today. Incentives are more the name of the game, the rule, and not the exception, whereas if we were having this conversation 5 years ago, it would have been the exception. The airlines are into something what's called risk mitigation, and anything that can help to mitigate the risk of putting that very expensive piece of airplane into a new market. It helps to advance the cause of the community.
Thanks, Bill. Dr. Walden, do you believe that adding just one international flight is going to have a significant economic impact to our region?
Well, the economic literature that I just summarized would say yes. And I summarized for you several impacts. I think, again, the most important being that long-run growth impact, which suggests, again, that in 25 years, the Triangle economy would have a GDP that is $1.4 billion higher than it would have been without the flight. And again, the underlying reason is, as we both of us have stressed, the global economy. The markets that are growing faster are outside the U.S., Asia, Middle East, Eastern Europe. And one of these international flights will allow the Triangle to access those markets in a more efficient way, as well as, we should never forget this, the other way. It allows those markets and those investors to access the Triangle also.
Right. So, Dr. Walden, state governments, city governments, county governments, are they going to benefit as a result of this one international flight?
Well, the one number that I generated to address that question was I focused on local governments only. And I estimated, given the expectation of additional economic growth, which I've again highlighted, what that would mean for additional local, that is to say county and municipality government's revenue in the Triangle region, and the number that the takeaway number would be over 25 years. In terms of a single present value number, it would be roughly $270 million.
Okay, great. Bill, can RDU, the region, can it actually support a second transcon flight into Europe?
You know, Mike, I think one of the great selling points that you have is the fact that American Airlines, that doesn't operate a hub here, has a nonstop service to London that has been here for 20 years. It's clear to me that this market can support international service, and I think, like Dr. Walden was talking about in his presentation, other gateways in Europe, whether it be Paris, whether it be Frankfurt, it does something for you that London does not. And so based on that, yes, I do believe it is time in the maturation process of the market to where it is. Prague really is important. You know, those markets beyond Frankfurt, beyond Paris are really important and are going to have developed some as a result of the London service, but have the opportunity to develop even more with a new service to a new geography.
Okay, great. Let's open it up to the audience. Does the audience have any questions for our speakers today? Yes, sir.
Curious about the thought of, thank you, the thought of the London service impact. If we were to get the Frankfurt or Paris flight, would the London service go away or suffer?
Want to do a tag?
That's an excellent question, and no, I don't think it goes away in any way, shape, or form. And the reason I say that rather emphatically, Heathrow is a constrained gateway. It does not have the connecting opportunities that does a Frankfurt, that's a relatively small local market, that a Paris, that's a decent sized local market, can bring. And so you're really, I mean, that Raleigh-London sector is very, very important, as are the connections. But as you saw from Dr. Walden's chart up there were tremendous other opportunities that were available to connecting opportunities over Frankfurt than are available over London today. And I would say the way it is that London is evolving, it's going to be less a connecting market and more a local market over time, just given the sheer size of that market.
Let me add to that just a little bit. When American and U.S. Airways came together, we had some concerns about this model that we have regarding nonstop service at a medium hub into a gateway into London. It's very unusual. There's not a lot of markets our size that actually have that. And so when those carriers came together, we were very concerned, well, who's going to take control of planning? Is it going to be the U.S. Airways staff, or is it going to be the American staff? And it turned out it looked like the U.S. Airways staff is the one that took the lead. There was quite a bit of discussion about, hey, we potentially could lose that service. I was on a panel with a government affairs person from American Airlines. He said, no worries there. It sits typically in their top 5 for profitability in their European environment. So it's extremely profitable for them at the end of the day. Another data point for you. We have about 780,000 people a year that are flying into Europe. Americans only carrying about 100,000. So there's still a huge market out there. And as we've gotten out and spoken to CEOs in the region, what they've told us is they see continued growth from the international standpoint. And when we listen to our business leaders, they are gravitating towards businesses that are in Europe in terms of overall economic growth. So there appears to be some continued growth will occur as well.
Given the fact that we've heard all these glowing reports, this obviously is a partnership relationship, RDU and the airline. So what's the barrier and what's the investments that are going to be required for RDU to get into it, and where does investment come from?
Well, 2 things, and it'll be part of my kind of closing comments. You kind of jumped ahead of me, but that's okay.
I got to leave too.
Yeah, that's good. So 2 things. The board of directors for the Raleigh-Durham International Airport has actually approved an air service development policy. That policy allows us to set aside about $2.1 million as an incentive for that carrier to mitigate their risk. Because again, our calculations is about $75 million for that one airplane to come in here is the risk that the carrier's got. So even though we think we've got the demand, Just because you have demand on a piece of paper does not mean the consumer is going to get in that airplane. So there's still a significant risk. So we're into for about $2 million. I will tell you your competition. Your competition is places like Austin. The local community raised $5 million. I think we've got a stronger market than probably what they've got from air service standpoint, I believe, and as a result, we're not encouraging or we're not suggesting that we need to raise $5 million in the local community, but there will be a challenge today from us to the community that we think we need to raise about $2 million is what the barrier is going to be. The community has to demonstrate that they're interested. As Bill has indicated, they've got one airplane. There's probably 7 or 8 markets in the United States, and all 7 or 8 are going to compete for that. And guess what? Everybody else in the country, their communities are coming forward, and they're willing to go ahead and make that investment because they see, what was the number again? 1.4 what? Billion dollars worth of economic impact for that one flight. I'm not sure where I go with all the questions, so I'm going to... Oh, sorry. Yes, sir.
So you've looked at Paris and Frankfurt as sort of the next, or what happens after that? If we're projecting out 25 years, what would be what's the next city, the next target city that we should be looking at after Paris and Frankfurt?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure we've looked that far ahead because, again, we've been working on this for 7 years or so for a second gateway coming out of RDU. It takes a long time to get that type of service put into play, and then you've got to demonstrate it for a long time to get another carrier kind of interested, and I think the demand's going to need to continue to grow. So I think our focus has been 100% on a second gateway. Paris or Frankfurt is really what we're trying to focus in on right now. Yes, sir.
If it's if we got a flight to Paris, are the folks in Paris having the same conversation saying we need to get into Raleigh? Are they out there trying to raise some money to get this leg, or are we doing all the heavy lifting?
We haven't had a conversation about that with the folks in Paris. Typically, there is, especially at the airport level, there's dialogue going back and forth between the airports. So, especially domestically, if we're going into another market, they're providing fee waivers, marketing support of their end, and vice versa on ours. I'm not sure that we've reached from a business side to see what they've actually got over there in terms of a similar type of approach. I haven't done that yet.
Mike, quick question. So you said $5 million in Austin?
Mm-hmm.
What did that look like, and how was it put together, and when was that done?
I tell you, it is very complicated getting that information because guess what? They're our competitor. And so we have tried to work around through some different contacts to try to figure out how that was developed. But what has been communicated to us, and difficult to validate, that it was the equivalent of their EDGE campaign. The equivalent of their EDGE campaign is where they raise that money from the private sector coming together. And they use that as a risk mitigation tool for the carriers for BA to actually provide the service into the market. But again, everybody keeps those cards close to the vest because if they have got a tool in the toolbox that works and they've clearly demonstrated they're able to recruit BA for nonstop service out of Austin into London, they don't want to share those details with us because we're a competitor. Next question. Yes, sir.
Michael, what's the load factor for the London flight now? And then I know this terminology is not going to be correct, but in terms of a Paris, Frankfurt flight, what's the inbound, outbound kind of split from international versus, the domestic, which way?
Sure, if you do this, you want to hand it right back to the gentleman. Dave, you want to try to help us a little bit, get really
sure.
Specific numbers?
On a year-round basis, the London trip right now is right around 80%. That goes down as low as 70% in the wintertime and as high as 92% during the summer. So on average, it's about 80. One thing that makes that flight particularly profitable for American is the fact that the business cabin load factor, the amount of seats that are sold up front, is probably always 90+%. So that's what they really, really like.
Other questions? Dave, or Teresa? Go ahead.
Professor Walden, I know you looked at the triangle and the impact of the triangle of a flight, but is there also impact on the region surrounding the triangle that would be beneficial, that you looked at all?
I looked at, we did the big triangle, so the 13-county triangle area. So it was a big region. That was the extent of our scope. And that includes using conversations with RDU. That includes the geographical area from which most travelers come from, fly out of RDU.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
It seems that as businesses are more and more going to be tapped for the new public-private partnership, it might be worth looking at somehow connecting into the public-private partnership with a new package that could include a new airline funding system. I don't know. Thought.
Okay.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. I'm Lori Policelli, Director of the Orange County Visitor Bureau, and I really don't have a question, just so much as a comment. Our new county manager, Bonnie Hammersley here, is very interested in this idea, and we've talked about tourism being involved as well. And I see my counterpart, Denny Edwards of the Raleigh Convention and Visitor Bureau. And I don't want to speak for Denny, but from a tourism standpoint, this is certainly intriguing, and we thank you for bringing it to the table. And please remember Orange County, and we're there to support. So thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Chairman, did you want to make a comment real quickly?
Thank you, Michael. I overlooked some introductions. One in particular, Tom Bonfield is the city manager from Durham. He's done a tremendous job in helping Bill Bell rebuild Durham. Tom, I'm sorry I failed to mention or introduce you at the beginning. Michael, that's it.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to go ahead and close here to get everybody out on time. And I'm going to give you 3 questions, which are the same 3 questions that the commercial carriers ask us. And we have to be able to answer all 3 questions. If you can't answer all 3 questions, they don't complete the analysis, and so they don't make a decision. So the first question is there demand for new nonstop international service? I think you've heard from Mr. Swelbar. Our staff has looked at it. We've talked to multiple carriers about that demand. We believe that the demand is actually there. And for us in the conversation with the carriers, it's kind of a checkbox that there's enough there to continue the dialogue. Question number 2, what is the airport willing to do to help mitigate against the significant cost of starting new international service? You heard it from Bill. Bill told you that that is the new standard out there, is we have to have some sort of air service development policy. The board has approved one. For international flight, it's about $2.1 million. It's a combination of marketing support and fee waivers. Check. Box number 2 is checked. The third question is a question that we still haven't been able to answer, and the question is, what's the community willing to do? The airline industry has changed, and our region is competing with many other great communities across the country for this type of service, and it's going to take more than simply the accolades that we get out there and what we've actually accomplished to attract this service. So we need to answer that question. And so we're going to issue a challenge today. RDU has put up about $2.1 million for this, and we want to challenge our community to raise an additional $2 million for an incentive package that we can go after this international service and truly compete on an international stage as we move forward. Over the next several weeks, we're going to reach out to lots of folks. We're going to reach out to state government, local government, CVBs, chambers, businesses, citizens. We're going to reach out to as many people that are willing to listen to us because we believe that it's got a significant economic impact to this region, and we believe now is the time. I believe that we are close. I'm going to leave you with 3 numbers. If you don't hear anything else today, just remember these 3 numbers. 1.4 billion, 14,000, and 272. The Triangle GDP will grow by 1.4 billion. It will create 14,000 jobs, and 272 million in additional public revenue will be generated for 1 international flight. Thank you for coming today, and we look forward to a continued conversation about growing international air service at RDU. Thank you very much.
Manager, how you doing? Good to see you.